But in the meantime, we got David Perell here. Welcome to the show.
What up,
David.
boys?
How you doing? Looking great.
Dude, look at you.
Thanks for dressing.
Look at you.
I figured I'm coming on, hanging out with the tech
Guns
bro.
blazing.
I'm gonna dress up.
Yeah. Well,
Love
it's
it.
great
You
to
look
have you.
fantastic.
How's your week been?
I had a white shirt but couldn't find my cufflinks, so major issue.
It still
about
looks
15
great.
minutes ago.
No. You're looking fantastic.
You look fantastic.
No bueno.
How's the week been? How have you been processing all the recent AI news? What's new in your world?
Dude, week's been good. I was driving over here. I saw my first ever Austin car chase.
No way.
So
Is that a
was-
regular thing?
No, I've never seen one before. Usually an LA thing. And I must admit, I got a speeding ticket on Sunday in Tennessee, so it was good to see the red, white, and blue lights in somebody else's rear view.
Well, that's
What
good.
were they driving? Was it like an F-150 being chased by?
Dodge Charger?
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
What are we
always the
talking about?
crappiest car that you've seen all day.
Okay.
Yep. Less to
Makes
lose.
sense.
Less to lose, more to run for.
Yeah, exactly.
There's so much to talk about.
There's a
I mean,
ton.
one, you should have been one of our first guests.
But you still are. You're still in the first 200 guests. It's no big deal.
Yeah.
We've been racing through the guests. But yeah, I mean, did you want to start with his post, his thread?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah. Can you set that up for us? Just kind of like general reactions to AI writing, kind of the Studio Ghibli moment. You're clearly thinking, your wheels are turning. A lot of stuff is going on in your head, and I think you kind of synthesized it well. But I'll let you tell it yourself.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've been teaching writing for the last 6 years,
Yep.
and I've taught a few thousand students, and I had a moment in November. You know what happened? I had a guy who was working for me, sent me a memo. I said, dude, this is the best thing I've ever seen you write. And he goes, AI wrote it. I was at a dinner last night, and I wrote up some notes, and then I just asked AI to summarize it, and I was like, whoa.
Wow.
And I shut down Write a Passage November 11th, and then I went to Argentina in December. It was my first vacation in a few years, and I want to learn about the country, so I was just using AI, and I was doing like 50 to 70 prompts per day, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is insane. And basically, fast forward to now, we're in March, or we're in April, and I mean, the writing's on the wall. AI is going to just completely transform writing. And this week, actually, I got my first ever rejection for how I write because somebody doesn't like that I'm talking about AI, that I'm promoting AI. So now I think what you're beginning to see is a big riff, right? There's going to be certain people who say, no, writing with AI is absolutely taboo, not cool. There's going to be the purists, the Luddites. And then there's going to be other people who just go full steam ahead, and they're going to say, you know what, this is the future. And it's really taboo right now to write with AI. But if you talk to people behind closed circles, there's a lot of tech forward writers who are like, whoa, I can like 3-4x my output. And they've basically built custom prompts, custom software to help them write better.
Yeah, I mean, Ben Thompson has kind of a thesis around this with the printing press reduce the replication cost, then the internet drop distribution cost to zero because you no longer needed a paper route. Now it's the instantiation cost has gone to zero, but there's still that human in the loop for actually generating the novel ideas, or even just bringing the idea or the fact or the information to the chain. I talked to some reporters. How is AI changing your job at the Wall Street Journal? It's like, well, writing up the fact is the least hard part about the job. And yeah, maybe it took me from that being 1 hour of my day to being 5 minutes of my day, but 90% of my day was still talking to people, understanding what's going on, surfacing new facts, and then bringing those to the readership. So do you think there's still value in being a writer in the sense that you are a generator of ideas or novel information? And yes, you are using AI as a tool to instantiate it, but AI hasn't really replaced your importance in the world.
Yeah, so let's just preface this. We're going to talk about nonfiction writing. That's
Sure.
what I know a lot about. Fiction's not really something that I can speak nearly as well about.
Sure.
But I went to a Peter Thiel lecture last night. He's
Yeah.
in Austin, and he's doing these lectures on the Antichrist. And I was at the lecture last night, and I was thinking a lot about this, right? Because, Peter, he's a
Yeah.
really interesting guy. He's always looking for what is the thing that people are talking about that other people haven't found. And I think that the lecture showed, first of all, that of course there's so much edge in just finding the things that other people aren't talking about. But then also I went up to someone who he works with after. I said, hey, I think the lecture could have gotten better in this way, in this way, in this way. All this is to say that AI can't do that work for you. And it's through the process of writing that you're really working through your ideas. You're trying to say, how do I frame this better? How do I shape this better? But what I do believe is that basically any form of writing that is driven on pure utility. So we're talking business memos, we're talking emails that your lawyer sends you that are fairly standard. Pure utility, not about the art of writing and not about basically maximizing the quality of thinking. I think basically all of that's going to be written with AI. So, and only in a few years, by the end of 2026, 2027, we can just assume that that'll be the case. But absolutely, if you're really trying to be a maximizer and not a satisficer, that'll be major human in the loop big time.
What do you think happens to our thinking abilities as humans and our clarity on life, business, work, our relationships when so often we have just this perfect autocomplete of everything that we thought we were going to say? Because sometimes when I'm, let's say I'm writing an email to John or one of our partners or somebody we want to work with, the act of, it's sort of annoying that taking the time to think about the, what I want to say and how I want to say it and what I'm trying to convey. It gives me clarity on that relationship or that whatever activity that we're doing. And in a world with perfect autocomplete or suggestions, maybe theoretically I could just, think about it for a while myself or autocomplete, send it and then think about it. But the reality is there's so much distractions in life. So maybe everybody just moves all the time that was spent writing emails just moves on to, TikTok or X. And it's just you're auto completing and then there's brain rot. That's sort of a dark take on it. But are you worried about what humanity loses by not thinking through writing?
I'm absolutely worried. I mean, I see major white pills and major black pills here. I think that if you're not seeing the pros and the cons, and I mean major pros and cons, you're missing out in a fundamental way of what's really going on. I agree with you. I think a lot of our information or a lot of the way that we communicate is did this person actually write it? And I think that what's going to end up happening is you sort of see this in the differences. Have you noticed how big of a separation there is between the vibe of your private group chats versus what you feel in public? I feel like the private group chat vibe is just going to be go even more. We're going to have to learn to write with voice and really show off our distinctiveness in writing as almost a adaptive way to say, hey, this isn't written by LLMs.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I completely agree. I mean, I think that, people are super busy, and the one thing that we've learned time and again about technology is that people value convenience. I listen to music all the time on my crappy iPhone speakers because I don't want to get up and walk to the other side of the room and hook in my USB cord. And I think you should never bet against humans going for convenience in the aggregate.
I think about that.
That's how I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I think about that web comic or meme all the time where it's wow, this AI was able to take my 5 bullet points and turn it into a whole essay. and then the guy receiving the email is it took this really long email and turned it into just 5 bullet points. And I have noticed that I'm doing way more work now, not over email, but just over text message. We coordinated this interview entirely over text message. I don't think a single email was exchanged. And I imagine there is this world where maybe we just do away with that intermediate step of instantiate this as we all know that we could turn this into a 20-page research paper if we wanted, or a 500-word blog post. But really, the takeaway is just what I could put in my group chat in one line. So
yeah,
we're all just going to
communication just condenses down, and it's just people saying their base interests. I want status. I want security. I want security.
Yeah, I mean, Dwarkesh had a great line about this. He was the recipe to being a good poster on Twitter or X is just write like you're posting in a group chat and just say just exactly what you were thinking. Don't try and wordsmith it into this big thing. Just post exactly what it is.
If this is the age of vibe. This is super high vibe times, because basically if I'm teaching writing and you're all right, DP, what are you going to teach people? What I'm going to say is what is your vibe and how do you get it out into the world?
Yep.
And how do you communicate that through writing? And so you're seeing a few things. Personally, I'm investing a lot in Riz, and Vibe. And I'm trying to think about how do I do those things.
It's working.
So like, yo, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. One thing I did start a few weeks ago, I've become a greeter at the church to get like a lot better at saying, all right, how do I, get better at talking to people, saying what's up, doing all the sort of frankly like shallow conversation that people rail on. I'm like, no, I want to get good at that. And then when it comes to writing, whenever I'm writing even like a text or something like that, I'm thinking, what is the energy that is unique to me and how do I get that in writing? And frankly, like I don't really know the answer, but that's the major question I'm asking. And when it comes to writing, I think that's what people should be thinking about a lot more.
Yeah, we like to call it the golden retriever mindset here. In the age of intelligence too cheap to meter, it pays to be hot, smart, and dumb, or hot, friendly, and dumb. And so you got to be just super friendly to everyone, looking good, and you don't need to worry about being too much of a sesquipedalian, as they say.
Exactly.
Yeah,
No
it's
more
an interesting
bitch face allowed.
Yeah,
It's interesting to think about specifically agents in the context of the workplace. Like it's very possible that likability becomes a core reason why somebody has a job, because somebody's running a business and they go, I really like David. I like being around him. I want him here, even though, we could get an agent to do this.
Yeah.
Like it's more fun to have David around.
Yeah. It's like the one
And-
person, $1 billion company. It's actually going to be like one person creates a $1 billion company and then like brings on 9 of his friends just because like, why not split it? It's a lot of money. And like, you like to hang out with other humans.
Yeah, I think you're going to sort of see the bifurcation. It's like, I think that if you're like thinking about, just talk about me. So it's like, I'm thinking about my career. I'm like, on one hand, I really want to invest in the human things, looking people in the eye, having better conversations. How do I show love and like actually connect with people at a far deeper level, and all those sorts of things that have always been core to the human condition. But now we're like, wait, hold on. Intelligence is getting too cheap to meter. That actually isn't as something that's unique to humans anymore. And then on the other side, like, you just think of the super cracked engineer who is really good with Cursor, really good at writing. I'm talking to some friends who are building AI-enabled agencies, and now they're working with like 5 times as many clients because they're like boom, 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 boom. But most of the people I'm talking to, like entrepreneurs and stuff, they're beginning to, Justin Maris has a good line where he says that the company is going to look more and more like the hedge fund, where what you have is you have fewer people, super highly paid. And one of the things that I've noticed is it's been a real head scratcher for me. Like, why has the managerial class adopted AI so much more than the sort of frontline workers? Like, what is going on? Because if you look at sort of the archetypal rollout of technology, it's usually the young people who are the early adopters. And there's a way that that's not true with AI. And here's my working theory. My working theory is that the way that you work with AI is basically like a manager. So if you think of what do you do as a manager, you set a vision, you delegate the task, you say, hey, do this, you expect it's not going to be good enough, you're giving feedback, and you're going through the cycle, and then you ship it, right? That's how we work with LLMs. If you're a frontline employee, you don't work like that at all. So this is super disruptive to your work. And all this is to say that a lot of those managers too, if you talk to them behind closed doors, you know what they say? My hardest problems don't have to do with the work. It has to do with the people. And now I can take out the people. Once again, I think it's super dystopian and also pretty exciting, both of them at the same time. But that's what I see happening right now.
Shifting gears, can you talk a little bit about the religious vibe shift in tech? I've had a number of reporters reach out to me. Hey, I'm writing a piece because I saw Augustus Dorico had a cross on his neck or something like that. You've been in this milieu for forever. What is the mainstream media getting wrong or right about that narrative and that shift?
Let's see. So I'll just give sort of my take on the shift.
Please.
We've had a few things happen. So the first thing is the more online you are, I think the more that you've looked at what's happened basically since about 2012, maybe 2016, last 10 to 15 years, and you've just said something is strange about society right now. You see COVID, you see the Hunter Biden laptop story. I mean, there are so many ways that we've been lied to. I was thinking, in the early 2010s, if you went away for 5 years and you came back, what would be really confusing was the rise of social media. In the late 2010s, if you went away and you came back, what would be really confusing is how much morality had changed. What you could say, what you couldn't say completely changed. And for me, I looked at, wait, hold on. All of our moral codes are ebbing and flowing. There's all of these ways where we've gone from a kind of a democracy to a bureaucracy, and I don't want to live in that world. And as I looked at it, I traced a lot of that to a kind of atheism, where Malcolm Muggeridge, he has a great line. He says, the problem with atheism isn't that you believe in nothing, it's that you'll believe in anything. And so I watched people with their bodies as empty vessels adopt completely rotten and corrupt ideas. And I think a lot of people, including myself, by the way, and I think a lot of us who are more online have seen that cycle play out, and we've said, hold on here, I don't like what I'm seeing. So then we take a step back, and the more tech-oriented people, we've seen people like Peter Thiel, a lot of us have studied the work of René Girard, and we've said, you know what, smart people like Peter and René, they're talking about Christianity, there might be something here. And then for me, what happened is I looked at that for 5 or 6 years. I really studied it deeply. And I came to the conclusion that Christianity wasn't just useful, but it also happened to be true.
Can you talk about how you would walk someone away from the cliff that is utilitarianism?
I would just say, look, that's probably not the frame that I would take. What I would just say in terms of if I was talking to somebody about faith, what I would just say is I'd probably be more likely to talk to someone about, hey, look at what's happening in the world, and are you happy with it? I mean, if they're happy with it, it's gonna be hard to have that conversation. But I think that part of the challenge with utilitarianism and a lot of these moral philosophies is we've seen them rise up and sort of cyclically break. And I don't know, this isn't a great answer. I'm sort of fumbling my words, but I think that the Bible carries sort of this supernatural truth. That
I mean, I had a hot take here I wanted to bounce off you. It was this idea that a lot of the AI doomers were driven by this idea that God is dead, and if we're inventing AI God and it returns, it might judge me. And if I'm living an immoral life, the AI God would sentence me to essentially like an AI version of hell. It's not a problem to live an immoral life in the absence of God, but if God returns in the form of this AI God, then there will be a reconciliation moment. Do I need to put on the tinfoil hat for that?
Well, I mean, I personally think that, there we go. Put it on, baby. I mean, personally, I think that if you read the Tower of Babel story, I think that a lot of my faith is I don't think these AIs can become gods. I think that something will happen. And we see that in the Tower of Babel story. You know, you've seen people come out and say, hey, we're building these new gods. Read Psalm 115. Bad things happen when humans try to create gods. We've seen this story play out. And to come back to some of your earlier questions about tech and utilitarianism, look, a lot of the peace that I have with what's happening with AI, I'd be freaking out if it wasn't for my faith. I mean, I have complete faith that God is in charge. He'll take care of this. And when I read books like the Book of Judges, I see people turn away from God all the time. When I read the Old Testament, the Exodus, you see the golden calf, and I just see AI as another version of that.
Can you talk about specifically historical moments that we can learn from in the context of this, explosion of artificial intelligence, right? I think people talk about the Industrial Revolution, right? Look, we didn't know how the Industrial, Revolution was going to change the world. We do now, looking back, obviously, but it feels like right now we're standing and especially in the context, there was a piece that came out this week, AI 2027. We covered it earlier on the show today, where it just feels like only 18 months out, like, there's these various paths. Neither seem that appealing at the moment. And so I hope there's a third or a fourth or a fifth. I'm sure there are. But how do you, whether it's in the context of the Bible or other things that you've read, process this moment? And maybe it is only, maybe you can find all the answers in in faith, but I'm curious.
No, yeah, I think that the work of Marshall McLuhan has been super foundational for me. So Marshall McLuhan, he was a media theorist, late 20th century, and what he did for me was I felt the same sort of, oh my goodness, everything is changing kind of feel from the internet. And he basically had ways of seeing what happens when new technologies develop. And basically, I think a lot of what we're seeing here is this like vast acceleration is what he saw. So you get this 10x acceleration, and then what happens is things begin to flip, and things that used to be core to how we lived and what we do now become art. And I think that that's a lot of what's going to happen with writing, where I think writing is going to be very sort of a form of art in the same way that film photography was a form of art, in the same way that a lot of art that you see and craftsmanship that you see used to be very core to what we do. And I think that's what's going to happen. I think that writing is going to be the utilitarian kind of writing will just be done by the AIs. And then a lot of writing will just be artistic. And what we're going to need to figure out is how do we put our artistic stamp on writing? Because there's no real way to verify that a piece of writing is writing in the same way that you could do that with like a live performance. But one of the things I'm really looking forward to, there's all these doomers. And to your point about technological precedents, I was talking to my friend Justin Murphy, and, he said, if you look at how art shifted from the 14th century to the 16th century, you look at 14th century medieval art and it just looks weird and creepy. It's like super flat. And then you look at 16th century art in Italy and it's got this beautiful perspective. The paintings are aligned or alive. And what happened was we got the technologies of the camera obscura. And then if there was a guy named Leon Alberti, and he was an architect. And what he did was they used a lot of the technologies and architectural tools at the time to basically show perspective. And from that, we got a renaissance in painting. And the same thing's going to happen with writing. And I bet that at the time, people were like, oh, you can't be using technology to paint. Like, that's not cool. And then, like, I don't want to go back to that sort of painting. Like, the stuff that came from it was super cool. And I think the same thing's going to happen with writing.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about the great writers in history sort of referencing, past works and having to go to a library or travel to multiple libraries or visit collections and sort of study. And then now the ability to like
Studio Ghibli style.
Well, communicate with an LLM that is trained on,
Everything.
every available text that at least that's been on the internet and maybe some esoteric text as well. Do you think there's any merit? Have you spent any time like trying to find books that just haven't been uploaded ingested into the LLMs?
Knowledge.
Okay, so I'm gonna answer that, and then I'm gonna ask a question to you guys.
Okay.
So rather than the forbidden knowledge, I haven't been doing that as much, but there's so much that's just lost to there's so many answers that we used to have very clearly that then we have just forgotten. I think one of the fundamental lies of modernity and basically of progressivism in general is that new is better always. And that's not true. Like Joe Rogan always talks about, how did they build the pyramids? Oh my goodness, like they must have had these crazy technologies. Like even, we could put the tinfoil hat back on, but even if that's like nonsense, whatever, I don't know. But there's so many times in history where we really had deep understandings of things that we've completely forgotten about. And like, we don't necessarily need to go find these like crazy esoteric texts. We can go find, like, take Henry George's book, right? Late 19th century. It was like the number 1, number 2 best-selling book in the world. There's The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis. Great book, 17th, 18th century. Like, I think there's a lot of alpha in just going back at the bestsellers before 1970 and just go read those books. And see what people are saying. And luckily, AI is a really good way to do that. One thing that's fun to do is go in, take an idea, go into ChatGPT, go into Grok and say, here's my idea. Now help me round it out and give me some examples. Like, I've just been working on this little bit that there's fundamentally three kinds of girls. There's Lana Del Rey girls, Taylor Swift girls, and Beyonce girls. And so, like, I was joking around with some friends. We're like, hey, let's just pop it into Grok. And Grok is like helping us, think out the theories. Hey, this is why it's a stupid idea. Here's why it's a good idea. And that's what I love about it is like you're giving it some sort of ridiculous idea, and then it's saying, okay, let's kind of fill it in for you. And you can very quickly get to the stage of like, how can I find those esoteric ideas much faster? And how can I kind of um, find the lines that then I can draw inside of?
How do you have any type of thesis around the LLMs and humor? It seems to be the one thing that they really struggle with today, where they get the structure of a joke, but they're not nailing it yet. They can make you
Dude.
laugh by being absurd, but
Did you see the Tyler Cowen joke?
Yeah.
Did you see that
The-
in GPT 4.5?
the
So
Be Me one.
yeah,
Yes, the
dude,
green
Yeah,
text.
yeah.
it's hilarious. So I think that the humor thing's gonna be a problem to be solved. The LLMs are gonna be hilarious, and they're gonna be hilarious in two ways. So the first way is niche humor. Like,
Yeah.
if you take a great comedian, they're going to be good at the mass market stuff, but like say that you and the three of us, we go and we do like a trip to New Orleans for the weekend, and we say, all right, all these things happen, and like we talk to LLMs for like 45 minutes. We say, here are all the things that happen. Now give us some jokes. Dude, I bet it would rip. I bet it would be so freaking funny.
But
And
just
once we
us.
yeah, exactly. Like
No,
once we get to-
and we've talked about this earlier on the show. John has Coogan's law, which is like talking about the value of coinages. So on that note, I've been working on the Hayes paradox, which is the idea that the funnier that you think something is, the less likely that the mass market is going to find it funny, right? Because like something that is just ultra niche is just like the most interesting, the most funny, the most stimulating or whatever. And I think that's what you're kind of getting at it in some way, is like having a comedian in your pocket that can joke about like the thing that happened to you that minute and simultaneously 10 years ago in your life, and like connect those ideas. And the idea of like the same thing of, we have a therapist in our pocket, or we have a tutor in our pocket. You now could potentially have this sort of like comedian.
Yeah. So last question is a question I think you had for us. Do you want to close out with that?
Well, I mean, this is the question that I've just been thinking a lot about, and it gets down to like the nature of the soul and the nature of what it means to be a human.
Yeah.
There's that famous idea of the map and the territory. And what I think is basically happening is that when it comes to writing, the map and the territory are going to be the same. And when the map and the territory are the same, what comes from that? Is like, if you have such a good simulation of humor and such a good simulation of consciousness and such a good simulation of care, is it those things or is it not those things? And I don't know the answer. It's just the question I've been asking all week. And
my immediate thought is that our mutual friend Jeremy had this idea.
Master of the take, the king of
Master
the
of the take smith himself. No, he had this idea, like in the Ghibli moment, he was like, my thesis that like AI will be the reason that everyone logs off forever is like, if you go on your device and it's just this, hamster wheel of entertainment and dopamine. And then eventually you just, it gets so good at, at whatever it's doing or whatever you want it to do, that you want to actually go back to the variable reward of going to the group chat where somebody has a terrible take and then somebody has a good take. And it's this sort of like truly organic experience, and who knows if everyone logs off forever, but it's that desire for realness has been something that has been common throughout human history, right? You don't like, people wouldn't travel somewhere far to have like the authentic cuisine if it hit the same to have like, the sort of like perfect recreation of it here in America, right? So that like desire for authenticity and realness, I think is deeply human. And I think people will seek other humans out for that.
Which is great, because what I hope is, I think that we were at the absolute bottom of realness in the late 2010s in cancel culture. That was a time when people were terrified to be themselves. Everyone was super polished. It was the decline of the mass media empire that we're still sort of living in and seeing play out every single day. And then we're going to get a big flip into realness, into authenticity, and here's the other one, into forgiveness. Because we can only have realness and authenticity in our culture if we have a culture of forgiveness, when we can allow people to make mistakes. And I think what was so traumatizing as a culture about those years is that we couldn't be ourselves because we couldn't forgive. And my hope is that we can just move on from that and become humans in this digital sphere.
Well, you have to forgive us for not having you on sooner. This was a fantastic conversation.
I really
David.
enjoyed it.
Thank you so much
Thanks,
for coming
boys.
on the show. We'll talk to you
Thank
soon.
you for dressing the part.
And
it's
looking
great to
very
have you.
polished. You know, some things from the late 2010s. Polish is back.
Dude, polish is back.
We're keeping the
actually,
polish.
that's what we have in common. You know, you guys have the polish with the show. I try to do it with how I write.
Yeah, of course.
And thanks, guys.
Yeah, have a
This
great
was
weekend.
fantastic.
We'll talk to you
Have a
soon.
great weekend.